morning, everyone. Oh, sorry. Wait there. Got to go back one. I hope I've got this spelling right. Correct? I can't see anyone in the crowd, so bear with me. I've got these lights pointing at me. But I'm really happy to be here and share what we've been doing over the past 5 years at Bang & Olufsen in the transformation journey. And I do think as a brand, this is my first anecdote, is I don't think you ever stop transforming as a brand in today's world because of the pace of everything that's going on. But before I start, I would like everyone just to, it's gonna give a good picture at least. Can you just activate if you've heard of Bang & Olufsen, could you just put your light on your telephone? Well, that's pretty good. Awesome. Well, that's really, really good to hear. I think, like I say, you know I'm from Bang & Olufsen, I'm talking about it, but the reality is we're a 1% brand. Which means, again, unaided awareness. So if you walked into a room with 100 people and asked them, can you name 5 audio visual brands? One person in that room would turn around and say Bang & Olufsen. So we've got a massive awareness problem. So when you usually ask and you go a bit deeper, the Bang & Who, you turn around and say, oh, well, my grandfather had that product, or my father had that product. So again, a massive problem with awareness, which I'm going to get into a little bit later on as well, especially Gen Z, which is an incredibly hard audience to reach. But it wasn't always that way. I'm going to take everyone on a little bit of a journey, just to give you some sense of what this brand was, because like I say, 5 years ago, I was handed the keys to an icon. And I was incredibly proud to sort of say, how do I make this into an icon again? There was a time when the whole world was looking at Bang & Olufsen of what's next within audio electronics. I think this print ad does a very, very good job. And again, this is a bold print ad, and I'll get back to boldness later on, where, obviously technology was being dominated by the Japanese market and by APAC. That's where most of the innovations were coming from. But here is for a product. It's the Beermaster, the Beermaster 1900, and that was in 1976. And I think the picture does a very, very good job of describing that the world was looking at us for what's next. This tiny little company in the middle of Denmark, everyone was looking, what are they going to be doing next? There was a time, I know there's maybe vinyl's having its revival, but there was a time when putting on a record was a really, really shitty user experience. There was, again, you had this thing, it was a pickup, you had to pick it up, and you had to put it down in exactly the right groove for the song you wanted to listen to. And, you could scratch the record. It was like the reproduction of the sound wasn't very, very good. So, in 1972, this is a piece of a piece that was designed by Jacob Jensen, who was a famous Danish designer. It's part of the standing MoMA museum. So again, their design. And what he did, he created this thing called the tangential arm, which used technology to track the grooves in the record. And just by pressing a button, it actually tracked the grooves and it put it down in exact the right place. So that music that you were listening to was like brought to you in a much better quality. The fidelity of sound was fantastic. But not only that, it was based on a better user experience. So this whole thing about putting it on versus just pressing a button. And this thing, like I said, looks absolutely amazing. That was 1972. This one here is 1982. Believe it or not, there was a time when you couldn't listen to music in different rooms. I know that's hard to understand today because everything is connected. But we actually come up with and coined the terminology multi-room with this product called the Link. The Master Control Link. And what this did is, again, it was hardwired in your house, but it allowed you to control all your music and all of your different products, Bang & Olufsen products, from one point. So you could listen to music in different rooms. So again, and this, believe it or not, obviously, This was 7 years before the World Wide Web was even invented, and 28 years until Sonos hit the shelves. So again, amazing innovation where we looked at what is the human problem and how do we come back with a solution that allows people to sort of listen to music in different rooms. There was a time when putting on a CD, again, for the people who remember CDs, it was one at a time. You used to put it in, again, you had to take it out. You were like one song on that one, you'd had to take it out, you had to put another CD on. So we came up with this idea, which is putting like music on display, 6 CDs. So you could have all the different things you wanted. And this thing, there's a little shuttle on this thing, you can see it up here. It moved at the pace of a Ferrari car back then. So it was like seconds. It was moving to the next disc, putting it on, which actually allowed you what we call seamless listening today. So that the time and delay between each track was like nothing. So it was so fast. And again, it was vertical when everyone else was horizontal. You could put it on the wall in many different ways. So another innovation, this is also, again, sitting in the MoMA Museum. This is designed by a guy called David Lewis, English designer. So, we're turning 100 years next year. Nearly a century later, we're still innovating, but we're innovating for a very, very different world from back then. And I think it's always good to get an understanding of like, where do you sit? So the first thing we did is like look historically of the different paradigm changes that's happening in the world. You've got the first, you've got your first industry 1.0, steam. We weren't around then, so we didn't exist. We didn't have any innovations. But if you look at industry 2.0, electricity, that's where electricity came. And we came up with an innovation called the Eliminator, which was one of the first products to put basically Bang & Olufsen on the map. And what this did, again, we take it for granted today, but before you were listening to a radio, and that radio had massive batteries that needed to be changed every week. So what we did, we came up with the idea of like, okay, let's do an adapter where you could actually plug it straight into the mains. Take it for granted today, but back then it wasn't that. Completely revolutionized the industry, put Bang & Olufsen on the map within electricity. Obviously, industry 3.0, we completely dominated that. From the 70s all the way, I would say, until about the 2000s, we were completely dominating that category. And we've got so many different innovations and so many awards we won with the different products we created. But if you look at today, connectivity, 4.0, that's where we are today. Any ideas of what the problems are today? Expectations. People's expectations are crazy. I think we heard a little bit about it yesterday, but literally your brand is getting compared with the best in category customer experiences. And I'm just going to play a little video here to give you a sense of this is what we're up against.
Do you feel that we now, in the 21st century, we take technology for granted?
Well, yeah, because now we live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots that don't care, because this is what people are like now. They got their phone, and they're like, it won't. Give it a second. It's going to space. Can you give it a second to get back from space? Is the speed of light too slow for you? Yeah.
It's a lot longer, this clip. I'm sorry I had to show. I know he's been cancelled from the cancel culture, but he does a very, very good job of actually explaining how people take and how people look at technology today. And it just so happens that's the playing ground that we play in. So how do we play in a category where every customer experience is being benchmarked, and the pace of technology is changing incredibly? So how do we play there? And if we look here, you've got, sorry Simon, I've got Simon's from Apple, you're going to hear him talk a little bit later on. We've got Apple, we've got Sonos, we've got Sennheiser, but we look at like mainstream consumer electronics. We're trying to pull ourselves as far apart as that as possible. And the reason behind that is quite simple. We're a small company, we haven't got the revenue, So there's no way we can innovate and be first movers in technology market. Again, like spatial sound, something that's coined by Apple. We're always going to be the ones that are actually trying to catch up. So we can't play on technology anymore, which is what we played in before. It was baked into a design, and we have to play into something else. So our positioning is moving to this place where it's aspirational. Again, we are an aspirational brand because we have a price point, we have that luxury. And one of the, one of the only brands I could say that is a proper luxury brand within consumer electronics. But we're forcing ourselves away from consumer electronics and pushing ourselves into the right top-hand corner where we're talking about luxury and we're talking about aspiration. Because to own a Bang & Olufsen product is an aspiration. It's a talking point. When you walk into someone's house, you see that product, it automatically evokes a conversation. And the positioning statement what we have is something called beautiful sound. And that's, again, the name of the talk today is 100 years of beautiful sound. And beautiful sound, we could never own just beauty because, again, everyone's using design nowadays as a USP. Steve Jobs was a massive Bang & Olufsen fan, and that's why he started using a lot of aluminium in his products. But beautiful, we cannot own anymore because it's becoming a commodity as well. Design is becoming a commodity. Everything we see is beautifully designed today. But if you actually join design, which we already own, and then the sound, the fidelity of sound, and connect these two, the intersection between beauty and sound, that's something we feel we can own together with everything else that goes, the ingredients that goes into the brand. So playing, how do we play? And again, this is not for everyone. This is for us. It's based on a lot of research, but also based on the legacy of this brand. And this is what the playbook looks like. And we've created these different verticals. And it's not that you can dial up different verticals within this brand platform. But we know design is something that's inherently something that's ownable for us. Like I say, we're sitting in MoMA. When people talk about us, they say it's design. So we automatically own that as a USP. Jakob Jansen here. The next thing we've got is heritage. And again, there's not a lot of brands within consumer electronics that's been around for 100 years. So we've got massive amounts of anecdotes around stories about our products. And we need to dial up that whole heritage thing. And we're going to be doing that, obviously, this year because we're turning 100 years coming up. Price point, you can see this product here. It's the Biolab 90. A set of these cost around 130, what is it? It's like 130,000 euros or something. Anyway, it's incredibly expensive. So we've got a price point that is really, really high. So it's not that you can just walk and buy these things. So they're incredibly expensive. The other thing we've started talking about a lot is atelier. And I'll get into this a little bit later on because I think definitely when it comes to luxury, it's also about who you are and what you stand for. And if individualism is something that comes up obviously very high, you want to be unique. As humans, we all want to be unique. So the atelier, what we're doing, we've got a special atelier. We've got amazing craftsmanship within the way we can color the products, the way we can dye them, we can put diamonds on them, anything you want, anything you can imagine, we can build in this atelier. We use a lot of natural materials, wood. We can also go and change that. So the product can fit into your home interior. So ateliers are very much an important part of that. And as like you say, a luxury playbook, you also have atelier within Hermes, etc. of the world. We've also been working a lot with collabs, which you've seen a little bit of the work. Ferrari, we've just done a collab with Riva, the boat company. So looking at other luxury brands that have a similar DNA to us, doing collabs together with them, because we haven't got a massive media spend. So what we need to do is look at partner with other brands that have the equity, and we feed off that. So another really important part of the playbook. And all of this is underpinned by bricks and mortar. So we have a huge bricks and mortar network, and everyone knows you don't buy this thing online. You listen, you go in, you want to see it, you want to hear it, you want to touch it. So it's something that we need to have. It's a physical experience. So that's a little bit about the brand. This was the other problem I had when I first came to the company, that the visual and verbal language had flatlined completely. It really looked like shit. And I'll just to give you an example, this is what it looked like. And again, there's a lot of things that's right about this expression. It's like it's young people. like I said, aspiration, the biggest aspiration we have is to look young. Look at me, I'm 52, I'm trying to look young, right? But the fact of it is that the audience is right, but the expression is completely wrong. As everyone knows, music and watching a film is one of the most emotional things you can do. It actually brings us to the moment. And these models look incredibly fucking miserable. Like literally, look how miserable these people are. Malnourished, again, using like high-end models to sort of portray this, borrowing from the fashion playbook, but not really having an expression that's ownable for ourselves. So looking at fashion, I'm like, we can't do that, we need to move it away. So I'm just going to share a project we did. I think we did this like 7 months ago. And what it is, it's the 9000, which I showed early on. But also, it's what I think is really incredibly interesting about this piece of work is we've took an old product, which is like remade it, brought it up to today's technology. But the expression that we wanted to bring was obviously, how do we make this look as close to the 90s as possible? And just have a little look at this film. Yeah, so a little bit of attitude, a little bit of boldness. I shared this with the management team, and again, I'll get into this a little bit later on, and it was like, did the storyboards, took it into everyone and saying, hey, she's going to be smoking, she's going to be drinking a Cosmopolitan. Not a problem. Then when they see the edit, like, what the fuck, she's smoking? And I'm like, yes, she's smoking. That's part of what everyone did in the 90s. Everything in that room, every detail on that woman was poised to actually look at what the 90s was and what that product looked like back then. This is a little bit, again, about expression. So again, very monochromatic world, but also verbally, how can we take more space verbally? You saw the first ads with the incredibly miserable models, but here to make history again, being a bit more bold. Recreated, replayed, reborn. Iconic, any way you look at it. And here we did, in the shoot, there was a lot more stills and they look beautiful. What we did is we were working with the reflections of the CDs. So again, to give this hue of this huge sort of like Prisma palette that fills the room. But again, looking at visually and verbally how we actually create cut through. Because again, we do not have a massive amount of media. So when we actually show ourselves, we need to stand out. Right. Back to that 1%. Okay, so how do we deal with the 1%? This is a really interesting slide. It's super depressing. But I did this for a reason because I really I call this slide the death of loyalty. And I wanted to make a point upstairs. Again, there's a lot of old men sitting in that board. So, hey, by the way, guys, we've got a massive affinity with boomers. Huge. These people are super fucking loyal. They literally love bricks and mortar. They are loyal to a brand. They're going to be dead. They're going. That's what's happening. 15 years, 10 years, they're gone. Which means we lose a massive amount of people from our audience that has a high affinity and talks positively about us. Then you've got Generation X, which is myself, again, growing up in the 70s. That was the shit. You had the product, you walked in, someone's like, they've made it. They've got a piece of Bang & Olufsen kit. But we have completely jumped over millennials and Gen Z. And Gen Z, just so everyone knows, is 45% of all luxury sales next year. So, massive amount of people. And that audience, again, they buy something, like you see them, the kids these days, they'll wear a lot of secondhand, they'll buy a Gucci handbag. They'll save up for that, or a Louis Vuitton handbag. And I think we haven't connected with them whatsoever. So we did some research, and this was actually really an interesting piece of work that even I understood as a creative, because I'm like, again, research can sometimes go over my head. And what we did is we mapped out what we call strategic pathways. We did this for the two main audience groups that we're after, which is Gen Z, high net worth individuals, people with deep pockets. Require totally different things. So again, as a brand, you cannot look at how do you hit everyone with one strategy. What we've seen in the research, history and audio electronics, interesting, but not that interesting. What they want is superior sound. Check, we've got that. Music is the artist intended, so how do you actually recreate that sound that you feel like that artist is in the room with you? You're sharing the experience with the artist. Something they can identify with as a brand, and something they can feel connected with other like-minded people. That leads to advocacy, and when you hit advocacy, everyone knows this, check, poop, you get positive word of mouth, and that's how you build it. So we needed basically an idea to sort of home in on this. One of the things that I've harped on about a lot, we haven't been talking about music. Literally, like I say, you saw the models, but we're not talking about music. And I think without music, we are dead. Music is what we listen to on our things. It makes us feel something. It's how we connect, it's how we express ourselves. So music is an incredibly important part of how do we talk about music. You saw that and also on the spot where there's just a woman enjoying music. So again, it's incredibly different. We haven't been doing this, which for me was ludicrous. So the other thing we saw is Gen Z love to sort of have, I would say, giving them stuff that actually make them look good. So avatars was a massive thing. We saw that, but we thought these avatars look really shit because, it was one-to-one representation of your human. So we're like, maybe we'll do something a little bit more quirky. Maybe something like this is a little bit different. Yeah, because again, we want it to stand out. We don't want us to blend in with the rest of the category, which is looking like humans. Let's do something completely different. We also needed a vehicle. Back to the whole thing with media spend. We needed a vehicle that actually we know worked. Spotify Wrapped. 60 million people do Spotify Wrapped every year. So it's something that everyone knows how to do. It analyzes your whole playlist and it spits back this canned version. But we know, so we wanted to do this, but we said, how can we elevate this into something that feels very unique and highly personalized? Because this isn't highly personalized. So yes, we needed that. And this is what we did.
The soon-to-be 100-year-old brand Bang & Olufsen has struggled to connect with younger audiences. So, we decided to create an experience that captures the imagination and attention of Gen Z, using something highly personal and expressive for us all: music. See Yourself in Sound poses a simple question: what does your music taste actually look like? The answer comes in the form of a 3D dancing avatar, yours to keep and to share. We went beyond the likes of Spotify Wrapped to transform your listening history into a new take on the avatar, one bursting with quirkiness, energy, and life. An avatar 100% unique to you. The digital platform analyzes your entire listening history from Spotify and matches it to different shapes, textures, colors, and moves. Like musical Lego, your avatar even gets its own name. The result can be shared seamlessly on social media. From using motion capture suits, to partnering with the Copenhagen Contemporary Dance School, to working with a composer to create bespoke soundtracks, each element of the avatar is entirely personalized. We launched the campaign using influencers from the music and design space, driving people to events hosted in our stores across the globe. And the world took notice. And, more importantly, our audience shared it far and wide.
Yes, super interesting campaign. And when I first shared this with the team, I thought, oh my God, the management team's going to shit themselves. And they did. But again, it takes a little bit of boldness. And I says, we need to do this. We saw, after we did measurement, we saw a 17% uplift. Positive brand awareness among Gen Z. Even people that didn't even know who we were actually had a positive association when we shared this. And I think they created over a million different avatars. And that was without any media. Again, we weren't like Spotify putting it on billboards. We just didn't have that media capability. So that worked. So this is the last section I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to give you some takeaways. Hopefully this will provoke some thoughts. This one here is a classic. If everyone knows me, they'll hear us say this over and over again. So I think one of the biggest things, I've worked agency I think 24, 25 years, I've worked agency. And I've always wondered what happened when I presented this work into a room of people, like what happens afterwards. And 5 years ago, I went in-house. Now I know what happens on the inside. And this is actually so true because I counted it in a meeting where I had one idea on the table, and then I just sort of had these meetings with different stakeholders, and within 3 meetings, the idea turned really shitty. Literally, because people are actually having opinions, and people are paid to have opinions, some people higher up, but an opinion isn't an idea, and it usually just waters it down. So there's a massive amount of dilution comes in. So my job, I think internally, which I do appreciate because an agency can't do that, is I actually guardrail that idea the full way through the business. Meaning the ideas that we come up with are very much intact at the end of the day, and the ideas are coming out exactly how the creatives had the genesis of the idea. We keep it in contact. So it's a hard one to do as an agency, but I do think there needs to be more embedded working with the clients to understand and following that idea. So it's positive. This is another one. I use this as an argument all the time. So again, back to the whole thing with 3 meetings. Literally, if I go into a meeting and I'm not having people saying something that's like, I'm scared, I'm this, it's making me feel uncomfortable, then I've done something wrong. Because again, it's like change is uncomfortable. And what I'm always saying back internally is like, if we don't change, we're dead, back to the chart. We have to do something differently. So it's good if people provoke. Like artwork, we could all go out and look at art. We would all see something different because we're all biased. We're coming at it from different angles. And that's fine. But at the end of the day, you need trust in the system to be able to say, I'm going to trust this person. If he doesn't get it right, then fire him. That's literally how I say it. Fire me if I don't get it right, but you have to go with me on this one. Massive internal learning. Product team, they have always been the king because they're creating the products, but they're thinking it in a very functional way. They're very functional. So some of the stuff I've shared with the product team, they're like, I don't get it. I'm like, it's like people don't buy functionality, especially in technologies. Like again, hey, this has got like wind resistance, it's got this dust, I'm like, people don't give a shit about that. They care about how it makes them look, how it makes them feel. So I'm not selling a product, I'm sorry, but I'm selling an emotion. And especially in luxury where things are expensive. It's all about the emotion. Probably any data person in the room will kill me for this one, but I think it's a good one. I often use this because I do think data is amazing. It feeds a lot of stuff, but like I've seen that data is being weaponized in big organizations. And I think there was a video going around with Noel Gallagher where he was talking about the consumers don't fucking know anything. He says, did the consumer know that they wanted David Bowie? If you were to test David Bowie back in the days, they would be like, no, test Sex Pistols. Pfft. Terrible. It would not test well. If you asked, again, fast fashion. Imagine if you tested fast fashion. Not fast fashion, fashion in general. Like literally, that's the whole point. It's supposed to provoke. It's supposed to do something different. So it's like sometimes consumers don't know what they want until you give it to them, right? So, and I do think data can inform, but I do think creativity is what creates a differentiation for us as human beings and makes us different. And I think that's where you have to take a leap of faith sometimes, because there isn't any data on what that thing is going to do. The Avatar campaign, there wasn't any data. We just had to trust. Any media agency in here as well is probably going to get like really annoyed with this one, but it's true. We never even start the conversation around media till we have a baked idea. What we sell as creatives is like we're selling ambiguity. And what we do is, my job at least, is to strip out that ambiguity to make sure it goes through the business. But the fact of it is you can't buy media until you have a clear idea of what is that idea and how would you activate it? What are the channels you would use? Instead of this being like, hey, I'm going to start with a media agency that'll give me a media plan that's based on what? Right? So again, we always start with the ideas, we flesh the ideas out, and then we start thinking, right, what is the vehicle to be able to look at getting this out there and getting in front of people? And finally, this is another one I've coined a long time ago, and I think it's a good way of looking at. I think advertising is annoying. Like 99.9% of what we see is annoying. I think we've all got like ad blockers. You really get irritated when YouTube's there and you have to sort of skip that thing. I can't wait to skip them ads. And I work with this shit, right? But I do think we need to sort of reframe the way we look at advertising. And I think what I've done internally at Bang & Olufsen, I'm not talking about advertising anymore. I'm talking about experiences because it gives us a different framework to work off. Creating an experience is like, again, it's not about advertising an idea, it's about the ideas that become advertising. So come up with services, break out, like, again, come up with stuff that nobody else has done, but framing it is how do we create an experience for someone which is based on a dialogue. It's not like us monologue telling you, here we are. How do you create a dialogue is just a more interesting thing, and how do you create an experience? Because that's what's memorable. I think all of us in here have said, like, what are the things that we remember? It's the holidays. It's the time we went to a nice restaurant and had that menu, and God, it was amazing. Or it could be a bad experience, but you remember it. Advertising, you don't remember. Like I say, the stuff that we've seen over the past few days is back to that, like, 1% that wins in Cannes. And that is really good stuff. It's ideas that provoke. But the majority of what we see is incredibly poor. So framing it as an experience is a much more interesting way of doing it. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much for having me.